So I've got a short presentation here. It's about communications more than anything, but I want to talk about it in the context of a much bigger effort that's going on in North Alabama. There's a lot of partners involved. We're trying to engage family forest owners in shortleaf pine restoration. And so I'll breeze through these slides and try to get us on track as best I can. But if you've got questions, don't hesitate to stop me in midstream and speak up. So you guys know all of this, but in the context of Alabama, North Alabama, just in the past 30 years or so, we've gone from nearly 2 million acres to less than 200,000 acres. So it's really right in front of us, disappearing. And so we got together in Alabama, a number of partners, which I'll pull up here in a second, and started looking at the issue and where's it happening and what can we do about it. And one of the major challenges that we face, you see in, let's see if this works, this top left, I think that's 1972. The majority of our acres, shortleaf acres, are right here in the middle part of the state, and then that's going to be 82, 92, 2002, and then this is today. This is high risk zone for little leaf disease. So we've lost a lot of our acres in that area where a landowner would harvest a mixed stand, loblolly, shortleaf, hardwood, and then come back in and put it in loblolly plantation. And so that's a major challenge. And Mike and Kay and George, this is where we really need your guys' brains to think about how do we work with landowners in that area, because we frankly don't know. I don't know that it would be good advice to go into that area and talk to a landowner about shortleaf. And so we're going to look to you all for guidance on that in the future. But we decided in Alabama that there was some funding available, which I'll get to in just a second, up in this North Alabama area that we thought we could work and feel really good about promoting shortleaf in that area. So these are the partners, and I should add one here. I saw Chris with National Wild Turkey Federation just a minute ago. It should add two, and I saw Holly with Southern Regional Extension Forestry, and I should add those logos on here because they've been very helpful to this team to focus on this issue up in North Alabama. But I do want to touch on several of these and just mention some names who've been real leaders on this project. First and foremost, Mike, we really appreciate your leadership. There was a lot going on in Alabama before this project got started. Auburn University hosted a conference. Becky Barlow, John Cush, and others got together, I think, in 2011. But then it kind of went lull in Alabama for a few years, aside from what DCNR and U.S. Forest Service was doing in Alabama. They started with restoration work on state and federal lands, which I'll touch on at the end. But from a private landowner perspective, there really wasn't a whole lot going on. And so our state conservationist at the time, Dr. William Puckett, called us and said, we've had cost share dollars for shortleaf for a number of years, and we've not had the first customer take advantage of that. And is there something that you guys can do in an outreach component that will raise the awareness of this resource for landowners and get them to take advantage of it? And we asked them, okay, well, what have you done to promote it up to this point? And they said, well, we've run an ad in the local paper, that the dollars were available. And that's not getting it, And then this, the county conservation folks promote it to the working the lands landowners, our usual suspects. And I'll touch on that in a little bit later. So we all got together and said we really need to come up with a different strategy to try to get at this issue in North Alabama. We need to look at the people we've been talking to. We need to look at the rest of the population, and we need to reevaluate how we talk to landowners. And so we got together and started focusing on this issue. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and International Paper made a grant available to us to do this project. It was a little unusual project for them because they're used to all of their dollars going to trees in the ground and not marketing materials and field days and workshops and that sort of thing. So it was a little out of their comfort zone, but they were willing to do it because they hadn't had frankly, in North Alabama, they didn't have any other grant applicants for those dollars. And so they were willing to take a chance with us on this project. We felt like those things were necessary just to raise the awareness within the landowner and the forestry community. So we came up with some modest goals. About 1,300 acres is what we were looking at getting planted in the ground through about 20 cost share applications. So I won't go in depth in this, but we started looking at social marketing, not social media like Facebook and Twitter, but social marketing is kind of a strategy for how you move landowners from inactivity to activity. You can do some Google searching, look at seatbelt campaigns and non-smoking campaigns, and that's what we were kind of thinking about. So this is who we usually talk to in North Alabama. These are people that are members of forestry associations. They come to all of the meetings. They show up when NRCS is putting on a program, and that's who we've been talking to all along. But for whatever reason, they weren't taking advantage of this and wasn't doing any work. And so we decided we needed to start thinking a little bit differently about what we were doing. And we had been, Forest Service had put some money into the Sustaining Family Forest Initiative and the tools for engaging landowners effectively. And so we went to one of their programs and got educated. And it was very helpful to us to start to understand that that's not the world. That's not North Alabama landowners. They look more like this. And so we started diving into Forest Service data, National Woodland Owner Survey data, to see the landowners in that region. Who are they? What are their objectives? And you can see, when I first started in forestry, this was number one. And just in 20 years, it's dropped down to to the last at the bottom of the list in terms of objectives. But the thing is it's still there. It's just not in the front of their mind. When you talk to these landowners, these are the things that they talk about. They want to do these things, but then when you get to the end of the conversation, you say, okay, how are you going to do this? They say, well, it's kind of hoping that it would pay for itself. So it's there, but it's buried in the back of the brain and not at the front of the brain like it was maybe 20 years ago. And so how we talk to these landowners has to be different. We can't start right out the chute of, oh, you need to thin, you need to clear cut. That just doesn't work with our landowners anymore. So thinking about how we're going to approach the landowners with the conversation, what's the lead, how do you start the conversation? It's not about thinning and harvesting. It's about wildlife and aesthetics and recreation is how you start the conversation. And so then using the tele tools, we started to look at our landowners and how do you segment our landowners into different groups. And we decided these are the people we'd been working with. They're good people. They're doing the most management on the ground, but we didn't want to start with this audience. We wanted to bring them in a little bit later in the process, but didn't want to start with them. So we put all of our marketing dollars into this group. We did a lot of research into them, what they were interested in, how do you communicate with them, how do you start the conversation, what is it going to take to move them to activity. These are the folks that they own it for beauty and recreation. They're the least likely to sell their property if you were to make them an offer, and they're the least likely to participate in cost share, and they're the least likely to harvest their timber. So we had our work cut out for us, and we knew what we were getting into, but we felt like that was the biggest group of landowners that we hadn't yet talked to. So we put together a lot of different kinds of marketing materials. There was game wildlife and non-game wildlife. There was, can we send you an information packet in the mail, or would you like to meet some of your neighbors, or would you like us to send you a professional? We tried all different sorts of things. And what we found, typical standard mail responses is 1 to 2%. I'd had a lot of experience doing this in the past without the tele knowledge that I'd gotten. And I generally got about a 1 to 2% response rate when I just did mass mail marketing. Looking at the tele approach, diverse messages, multiple touches, multiple offers. We got about a 5% response rate just with the woodland retreat owners. But what was interesting is when you dove into that information and saw who were the people that were responding, We went out and we bought consumer data for all of those landowners. So we started with tax rolls, county tax rolls. We marketed it out to all of the landowners using that Woodland Retreat messaging. And when they came back, we looked at the people that responded. We bought the consumer data, which is just pennies per record. And what we found is people with some college, making over $100,000, and interested in hunting and fishing. We got probably about a 79% response rate from those folks. So then you can go back out and start marketing to those people and get a higher response rate. We did bring in about 500 into our marketing afterwards of this working the landowner because we wanted to make sure that our field days and our workshops were full, and that bumped our overall response rate up to about 12% when we added in those folks. So we went dealing with those Woodland Retreat landowners. When we went out and met them, we sent a forester to go and give them a site visit. The things that we learned about them, the majority of them said that shortleaf pine supported their goals, whether it was wildlife and recreation, those kinds of things. 57% of them had invasive species on their property. 100% of them wanted help. Management plans, almost none of them had a management plan. Most of them would appreciate some guidance through a plan. Only about a third of them had ever had a prescribed fire conducted on their property, but almost all of them would do it. And this is if it were appropriate. We didn't include the numbers if they were in hardwoods. And then cost share, and this is what was most surprising to us. We say one thing, but we say one thing publicly in Alabama. A lot of us are pretty vocal about not accepting cost share dollars, but when you're in a one-on-one environment with the landowners, every one of them said that they would appreciate some cost share assistance to help them take up some of these activities. So there was a lot going on in this project. It wasn't just marketing, and all of those partners that I showed you at the very beginning, each one of them had a major role in this project, from the project planning, benefit and barrier research of the landowners, the forester training. And this is what was most interesting to me out of this whole project, is the problem at the very beginning. NRCS had the money, they'd made it available. The problem wasn't the landowner. The problem was the resource professionals. If you go to Mississippi State, if you go to Auburn University, if you go to University of Georgia, you're right in the middle of that high-risk zone for little leaf disease. So if you're a graduating forester, you go out for lab and you look at a mixed stand and shortleaf is dead or dying, at that time 20 years ago, we were hearing, you want to cut that out. You want to get that out of there. It's different today. Ed Lowenstein at Auburn, Mississippi State, Georgia. I know for a fact that the curriculum, what the students are getting, is a lot different today than what it was 20 years ago. But that was by far our biggest barrier, was the foresters' management recommendations. So the money was there, but the foresters and the resource professionals weren't recommending it. So we invested a lot of time in hosting trainings for our foresters. We went and met one-on-one with a lot of the largest consultants, answered their questions, connected them to academicians, to seedling experts, and got all of their questions answered. So just a lot of things going on this project. I don't think I want to touch on any of the others. Let's see. So the accomplishments to date. So we had 72 foresters that were responsible for about 7 million acres. We engaged 400 landowners, promoted sustainable forest management on 63,000 acres. This was the main thing, is when we went out and talked to the landowners, we didn't go out selling shortleaf. The first words out of our mouths was, what do you want to get out of your property? And if it was something totally unrelated to shortleaf, that's where we went with it. This wasn't a hard sell project. This was something that was what was paying for the project, but it wasn't something that we wanted to cram down people's throats. But over the past couple of years, and I want to break this out, 4,000 of that 14,000 acres happened over the last 2 years on private lands as a result of this project. 10,000 acres have happened over the last several years, and that's on state lands and the Bankhead National Forest and on DeSoto State Park. And then on Drew, a lot of your Forever Wildlands and Galen's wildlife management areas across North Alabama. So over the past several years, we've had 14,000 acres, but as a result of this project, 4,000 of that came on private lands. 2,000 of it was a result of working with the consultants exclusively, and 2,000 of it was a result of that Woodland Retreat landowner mail marketing. And so that's how that breaks out. So what I really want to focus on, let me see how far we are. Okay, just a couple minutes on this last slide. On the left, that's kind of what we did over the past couple of years. We started with tax roll data, did direct mail. Each round of marketing would take 4 to 6 weeks just to get out there. And then when people responded, we weren't really sure if they were on, where their property was, if they were on important areas for shortleaf restoration. There was just some uncertainty. So we spent a lot of money reaching out to these landowners, bringing them to field days and workshops, and sending a forester and a biologist out to the property to meet with them, and really not knowing if that was a prime prospect for shortleaf restoration. So we spent over $2,000 per landowner visit on that model. Where we're going this week, night before last, we launched a new project. And this really started at your last meeting at Sehoy and Enon that John Stivers hosted. We were sitting in a meeting, and George Hernandez, who's here in the room, and Holly and Mike, y'all started talking about a GIS map layer on shortleaf pine soils. And we thought, boy, that would be incredible if we had a way to pre-screen our landowners and identify on the front end who we want to talk to. So we started running Facebook ads 2 nights ago, and what it does, it connects, a landowner will see an advertisement, they click on it, takes them to a website, and it's digitized parcel records. They can click on their tract, and if they click on a tract that is overlaid with the priority shortleaf soil sites, then it connects that landowner directly to us, and we give them a phone call. If they click on a tract that doesn't, it generates an auto-generated report that promotes sustainable forest management, uses Forest Service data to kind of tell them, you're in this area and this is the typical forest type that you're found in. This is the wildlife that you need to be aware of. These are the kinds of things you need to do. But we're not investing human resources with those landowners. And so when they click on it and it's a shortleaf priority site, then all of a sudden we pick up the phone, give them a call, we schedule a site visit, we go out and meet them, make management recommendations. And so we're moving significantly, from $2,000 per landowner visit to less than $1 per landowner visit. And it went up the night before last, and by the next morning, I think, we had 230 ads were put on people's pages. There were 9 views, and we had 2 signups already, just in that 12-hour period. So far so good, and I'll keep you guys up to date on how that works. That's it. I really appreciate you making time and let me. Yes, sir.
Question back from John.
Very good, Larry. You said in public, woodland owners are willing to admit they want financial assistance.
Yeah, I don't like generalizing, but that's my personal experience in Alabama.
One-on-one they do, but the stigma's why they don't accept it outright.
Probably could have a conference on it. I would be making a lot of generalizations to talk about it without backing it up with data, and probably would look foolish if I did say those things. But a lot of the people that I know personally, that I'd feel good talking about, I kind of call them closet conservationists. It's like shortleaf pine. In this kind of format, they wouldn't get up and start talking about their property in a passionate way, but you get on their property and they'll start pointing out all the pretty little purple flowers, in the places where they took their wife and proposed. you know, in one-on-one environments, we're different animals than in public environments.
All right, Chris.